Good morning and welcome. Thanks for joining us today. It is a great morning. I am here with Doug Gray, and he's going to tell us about how to lead in 2021. 9 tips. Doug, off to you.
9 tips. Let's get going. So the world has changed in the Q1 and Q2 of 2020 leadership. I think we embrace this idea of a better future. We're always moving up and to the right, but it's loosely defined. So I think people need to be clear about what's the difference between a manager and a leader. It's kind of like wearing 2 hats. So sometimes with an audience, I'll say, repeat after me, John. As a manager, ooh, you're not playing the game. As a manager, this is when you repeat back. As a manager, my job is to maximize the productivity of others.
Yes, as a manager, my job is to maximize the productivity of others.
You're not doing the hand thing. Other hand.
Okay.
As a leader,
my
job is to influence others' behavior toward a better vision.
My job is to influence others' behavior towards a better vision.
And I'll do this with teams and audiences. It's very entertaining.
And I'm sure they do this too, right? Because some people are confused.
Right, like this.
Yeah.
The fact is that they're 2 different things, and we goof them up. We confuse them too often. So managers who are focused on productivity, it's a private skill. It's coaching. It's one-on-one, as you just described. We'll identify the people who are talent risks, and we'll coach them for a period of time or not. Leaders are when John's in front of the room and you're expressing in public optimism why we need to go in this direction and how it's going to be a better future. You've got that capacity. I've seen you. I think too often people are confused about which hat they're wearing. So I invite people to use these terms properly and identify it with a telltale. We can do this on Zoom. As a leader, my job is to influence others toward a better vision, and then coach in a specific way. So AdFit is a model that I trademarked. It's globally validated, and we could probably spend a lot of time talking about AdFit, but I want to make it simple. So the A and the D stand for assessing that person's strengths and mindset. There's a bunch of assessments on these 2 websites. I encourage anybody who's viewing this to take them. And also ask, to what extent is John, the coachee, willing to change? If it's less than 60%, John has a fixed mindset about coaching. It's not worth my time or energy. Don't invest in that person. However, if they indicate a desire to grow, it's called a growth mindset, and it's arbitrary. I picked 60% just randomly. There's no validation behind this one. Sorry, John. But once we know somebody's strengths, character strengths, then we can focus on them and leverage them. And I'll give them a list of defining a meaningful objective. And from this list, you pick your top 3. So the A and the D as a manager define my engagement with the Johns of the world. And over time, your assessments are not going to evolve. They're not radically different than they were 10 years ago, and they won't be radically different 10 years from now. Your strengths are who you are. What we want to do is leverage your strengths in a way that we get at mutually important outcomes, performance outcomes, behavioral outcomes. So the A and the D are kind of like an umbrella, and then the F and the I and the T are what we do in each session. Does this slide make sense?
I'm following.
All right.
Now I'm at 62%.
Oh, come on. Crushing me. So in each session, the manager would work with the client, John, for instance, and ask, what do you want to focus on today? I do this all day long when I work with individual clients. What do you want to focus on today? The I is, what's the intervention, or that's just a psychologist term for the evidence-based process. What might work? Or what's the interaction? Have you considered this? And at the end of every session, whether it's 30 minutes or 10 minutes or 60 minutes, I'll ask, what are you taking away from this session that you'll do next? And I do a radical thing. I write it down on a legal pad, put it in that client's folder, and I end the call. As a manager, my job is to help them focus and consider the evidence-based interventions, and then for them to do the work. And then I say, after the call, offer a little prayer and a blessing, and energetically let them go. my job as a manager is to do that, is to maximize their productivity. If I were to hold on to that person's agenda, I wouldn't be able to sleep at night. And I don't mean that lightly. It's a critical step for managers to delegate with a process that they can return to regularly. Does this slide make sense?
It does. And on the takeaways, you're writing it down. I'm assuming that your coachees are also writing it down. And between the two of you, you revisit those to see if progress occurs.
Absolutely. And if they're not writing down, I'll ask them why they're not. And with some clients, they prefer recording so that they can review it later. And I think sometimes that's a cop-out, but I don't care. If they've got the resource and they can refer to it, that's just fine. The point here is if they do the outcomes that are mutually determined, we're moving forward. And that's what coaching really ought to do.
One last thing, Doug, right here in the middle for the intervention, you talk about OKRs and that these two models fit together. The OKRs fit within the AdFit model because it's something that's measurable and it's something that can drive results. So these two fit together.
Yeah, like a hand in a glove. You mentioned the tech sector. They've embraced OKRs faster than others in part because they want to have a voice. Millennials expect to have a voice. And 50+% of our workforce are millennials. So they need a voice, they need to write their objectives, they need to review their key results on a quarterly basis, and that drives their careers. It also drives their interactions with others. So no question to me that OKRs will be driving our work interactions for the rest of our lives. How's that for a broad proclamation?
Spot on.
So one of the facts is that executive presence is a thing that can be taught. Leadership development and transition are top reasons for investing in this kind of coaching. And our world is evolving. So it's a colorful image intentionally. I think we need to be very clear about whatever multicultural variables are important for our clients. If 3 of these are important, then that becomes the list that you need to hire for. Too often, I hired people for a long time that look too much like me. And I think that's a bias that we've all got and we can avoid. We are clear, this data is from the US Bureau of Labor Statistics, that our culture is evolving. And as it does, if we need a certain cultural mix or demographic match for a specific consulting engagement or a customer demand, then we ought to hire for that. And we ought to be very intentional. We also need to be intentional about how we're using the social media to project the initiatives, the outcomes that we desire. We know that more and more people own smartphones and tablets, and more and more people are using social media, at least on non-blackout days. We just had a blackout day. And the reasons are obvious. We're hungry for information. We know the neurochemical responses, and we know the dependence that can result from some of this. That also means that there's going to be ever more triggering ahead. So I think we need to be mindful of that in our leadership. And then you're going to like this slide. Measure how we work ahead. So digital literacy is a thing we can measure to what extent this is effective in our team, or how we're leading with digitization, how we're leading virtual teams. And we can track it over time. Obviously, it'll vary by the cohorts, the ages of the people participating. DDI is done.
I love this slide because it throws some of the assumption out the window that there are big gaps between the generations. There are minor gaps. Yes, baby boomers are not as digitally literate as millennials, but the gap is small.
You're speaking to my heart, brother.
Capable.
Yeah. Exactly. So the point is, we'll wrap this up. Let's continue the conversation. These slides are mostly meant to provoke. To oversimplify and say that there are only 9 tips that are necessary is perhaps the wrong message. But there's lots of content available. So if anybody has questions about learning analytics, data analytics, John is your guy. And click on this website and it'll direct you. If you have questions about organizational leadership, coaching, or talent management, I'm your guy, more so. And then I'll lean to John for the data to back it up. Comments or questions?
Hopefully you've seen from this that we love what we do. We would love to work with you. And Even if you're not sure if there's an opportunity, give us a call. We'd love to talk.
Nice. Thanks, John.
Thanks, Todd.